Amen. So you're there in Exodus chapter 13. And we are continuing our study through the book of Exodus. And we just got done with chapter 12 last week, which is dealing with the Passover. And we're continuing the story, but here's going to kind of give you a little more information about the Passover and also, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is one and the same thing. Okay, so when you're dealing with the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you're dealing with the same feast. But we're going to get a little more information here. And there's two things to really see here in this chapter. Well, there's three. There's the pillar at the end, and there's probably four. But anyway, there's two major things I want you to see, and that is the redemption of the firstborn and also just the Feast of Unleavened Bread and, how that was kept and just different things that it talks about here in chapter 13. So actually in chapter 12, there were certain portions I just didn't hit on, and that was dealing with that Feast of Unleavened Bread. And so I'm going to be hitting on that in this sermon. So let's look at verse 1 here. First of all, it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Sanctify unto me all the firstborn, whatsoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both man and of beast, it is mine." So the Passover, what happened? Well, the destroyer, obviously God, sent the destroyer to kill all the firstborn of Egypt. But the firstborn of Israel were spared, obviously, if you put the blood on the doorposts, and that's why he's going to pass over. You'll see the blood and pass over you, okay? And basically, he's stating here is that all those firstborn are his, because he's redeemed them, that he's bought them, essentially. There's a huge picture of salvation, obviously, with this, that we're bought with a price, and we're washed by the blood of the Lamb, and getting into that. But he's stating here that because when he killed the firstborn of Egypt, he also killed the firstborn of all their animals, And beast is just a term in the Bible to mean animal. So that term animal is not used in the Bible, but that's what beast means, okay? So it just means an animal. So it doesn't have to be some ferocious animal. It could be a cow. It could be anything that's an animal, okay? Now, look at verse 11. So I'm going to be skipping down to verse 11 here because I want to hit on the subject of sanctifying the firstborn, okay? So in verse 11 it says, "And it shall be, when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, as he sware unto thee and to thy fathers, and shall give it thee, that thou shalt set apart unto the Lord all that openeth the matrix." Now, it's a term that, to be honest with you, when I look at this term, I think of math, okay? Matrices, a matrix that you use in math, okay? But that is not what this is talking about. You can probably, and just to give you, when it says open at the matrix, do you remember the word that it used at the beginning of the chapter? Womb, okay? So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the womb, but matrix is an old term, but here's an easy way to understand what that word means. Have you ever heard the term patriarch? Well, have you ever heard the term matriarch? Matriarch. Matri means like a mother or woman, right? But particularly a mother, right? And arch means like principal. So it's like the principal mother compared to the principal father or patriarch. We live in this, white patriarchy, So you probably heard it with there's a bunch of libtards out there talking about it. But that being said, is that matrix, you can see the term in there for mother, right? And so obviously you can see where that comes from. But with my mind of like going through like different math, in college and high school and all that stuff, matrix, I'm just thinking like matrix. Or maybe you're just really worldly and you're thinking about the movie, The Matrix, So, no, I'm just kidding. But you may be thinking about that. But the idea is that matrix is just talking about the womb. And here's a great example of how the Bible defines itself. So you see that synonym because it's worded the same exact way. Okay, so not to park it there, but just so when you see matrix in the Bible, it's talking about the womb. Okay, it says, "And every firstling that cometh of a beast which thou hast, the males shall be the Lord." So after you see this, you're going to be very. I know I hopefully already convinced you that when they killed the firstborn, it was firstborn males, right? It was the man children, if you will, which made sense because that's who they were kill. That's who Pharaoh gave the order to kill as far as the Israelites, right? But keep reading there in verse 13. It says, "And every firstling of an ass thou shalt redeem with a lamb, and if thou wilt not redeem it, then thou shalt break his neck, and all the firstborn of man among thy children shalt thou redeem." So I love this because it's stating that, okay, if you have any firstling of an ass, then you have to redeem it with a lamb. Basically, if you don't want it to be a sacrifice, or you basically have to redeem it. You can't sacrifice an ass, okay? So what it's stating here is that obviously there's certain animals that can be sacrificed, and you either have to substitute that firstling of an ass with a lamb as a sacrifice, or you have to just kill that, have to break its neck. You just have to kill it, okay? And notice that it doesn't give you that option for the firstborn of the people, okay? It just says you're going to redeem them all, okay? So there's no other option there, okay? Now it says in verse 14, it says, "And it shall be when thy son asketh thee in time to come, saying, What is this?" Because you can imagine that you're doing this type of thing. It's like, well, the first born male has to be redeemed, or we have to kill it, right? When you're dealing with animals, and you can imagine that the children are gonna be like, "Why are we doing this?" But the reason that they're doing it is to bring remembrance about the Passover, about the death of the firstborn and redeeming the firstborn. Okay. So all this was done to basically remember, okay, God did this for us, and to look back to it, okay? It says that, "Thou shalt say unto him, By strength of hand the Lord brought us out from Egypt, from the house of bondage. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh would hardly let us go, that the Lord slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all that openeth the matrix, being males. But all the firstborn of my children I redeem. And it shall be for a token upon thine hand, and for frontlets between thine eyes, for by strength of hand the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt." So it's being done for remembrance, to show, okay, just as much as the firstborn were redeemed or killed, right? Now obviously with the people, they're not going to kill the firstborn children, right? The idea there is that they have to be redeemed. But it's picturing that Passover and showing that remembrance every single year. Now, Numbers chapter 3, go to Numbers chapter 3. And the thing with this is that it says it's all the firstborn males of Israel, okay? But what's going to happen here, and it doesn't mention this in this chapter, it doesn't mention this, in Exodus really. This is going to be mentioned in Numbers. And obviously, that's, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, that's the law, as far as the law that was given to Moses. So, you're dealing with all those books that really show you and give you a little more information about this. But what's going to happen is that he's going to actually take the whole tribe of Levi instead of the firstborn of all the tribes, okay? So obviously the firstborn of the Levites would be in that number too, but what he's going to do is basically switch them out. So when you see like the Levites, it'll say that they don't get an inheritance. The Lord is their inheritance, and the Levites are going to be the ones that have a job for the sanctuary and the tabernacle, and obviously Aaron's line is going to be the priests. And you see this and you say, why the Levites? It's because they are the Lord's. And this is why they're the Lord's, okay? Is because of this redemption of the firstborn, but basically that whole tribe was substituted so that basically the other tribes are not, happen to do this redeeming, okay? Does that make sense? And I'll show you that because we're going to see it here in Numbers chapter 3. Numbers 3 and verse 11 says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, And I, behold, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel, instead of all the firstborn that openeth the matrix among the children of Israel. Therefore the Levites shall be mine, because all the firstborn are mine. For on the day that I smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I hallowed unto them all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. Mine shall they be. I am the Lord." Okay, so we just read that, but here it's saying that the Levites are going to be instead of the firstborn of all those of of the other tribes. Okay. Now look at verse 39. Verse 39 is going to number the amount of males, and again, this really shows you that that's who was being redeemed. Okay. So I think you believed me before, but after seeing this, you're going to be very clear that that's who died in the land of Egypt. Verse 39, it says, "All that were numbered of the Levites, which Moses and Aaron numbered at the commandment of the Lord throughout their families, all the males from a month old and upward were 22,000. So 22,000, that's what they numbered as far as all the males. So we're not talking about all the firstborn, we're talking about all the males. Okay, does that make sense? Like just every male from a month old and upward of the Levites, 22,000. Then it goes on to say in verse 40, and the Lord said unto Moses, number all the firstborn of the males of the children of Israel from a month old and upward. So you see the difference here is that now we're just dealing with the firstborn of each tribe. And it says, and take the number of their names, and thou shalt take the Levites for me, I am the Lord, instead of all the firstborn among the children of Israel. And the cattle of the Levites instead of all the firstlings among the cattle of the children of Israel. And Moses numbered, as the Lord commanded him, all the firstborn among the children of Israel, and all the firstborn males, by the number of names, from a month old and upward, of those that were numbered of them, were 22,213. Now that's 22,273. Okay, so 3 is 60, add 17 or 13 to that, and you get 73. So 273. So what was the number of the Levites? 22,000. What's the number that we have of all the firstborn males? 22,273. So then, well, what do we do now, right? There's more firstborn males of all the tribes than there are males in the tribe of Levi. Well, it gives an answer here as far as what's going to be done. It says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, take the Levites instead of all the firstborn among the children of Israel, and the cattle of the Levites instead of their cattle, and the Levites shall be mine, I am the Lord. And for those that are to be redeemed of the 213 of the firstborn of the children of Israel, which are more than the Levites, so here's our answer, what we're going to do about that. It says, thou shalt even take 5 shekels apiece by the poll. After the shekel of the sanctuary shalt thou take them. The shekel is 20 gerahs. And thou shalt give the money wherewith the odd number of them is to be redeemed unto Aaron and to his sons. And Moses took the redemption money of them that were over and above them that were redeemed by the Levites. Of the firstborn of the children of Israel took he the money, 1,365 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary. And Moses gave the money of them that were redeemed unto Aaron, to his sons, according to the word of the Lord, as the Lord commanded Moses. So that 1,365 shekels, or 1,365 shekels, that's just 5 times 273. So math works out. I know it's not that complicated in math, but anyway, so I want you to see that and just kind of put that in the back of your mind when we go forward through the law, and you'll see like the Levites, God chose the Levites to do the office of the sanctuary. And listen, the thing to remember is that the priests were only given to Aaron and his sons and down the line. So that's the only people that would be the priests. And then out of that, there's a line for the high priest, right? But that's only under Aaron, and Aaron's obviously a Levite, but so is Moses, and so is like a lot of other people that are Levites. But the Levites have specific jobs, and you'll have Merari and Kohath, and you'll have like these different families that have different jobs when it comes to who takes down the sanctuary and builds it back up, who carries the vessels from one place to another, right? There's different jobs that they have. They're also going to have certain places in the cities, and they're supposed to teach and do all these different things. Okay, so they have a job, but if you're reading all that and you're like, well, why is it Levi that has that job? Because God chose Levi to basically to take the place of all the firstborn that were redeemed. So basically, he bought Levi with a price, if you will, and Levi belongs to him, and the Lord is their inheritance. Okay, so anyway, that being said, is that I just want you to kind of remember that when we're going through the book of the law or going through Exodus, but also when you're just reading through Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and throughout the Old Testament there. Now, go back to Exodus chapter 13 and verse 3. Now, let's get into the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The Feast of Unleavened Bread. And Exodus chapter 13 and verse 3, it says, "And Moses said unto the people, Remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. This day came ye out in the month Abib." Remember, we saw that this is going to be the first month of the year, and this is the month Abib. So it's mentioning that month here. It says in verse 5, it says, "And it shall be, when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and Hivites, and Jebusites, which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee, a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month. 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and in the seventh day shall be a feast of the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and there shall no leavened bread be seen with thee, neither shall there be leaven seen with thee in all thy quarters. And thou shalt show thy son in that day, saying, This is done because of that which the Lord did unto me when I came forth out of Egypt. And it shall be for a sign unto thee upon thine hand, and for a memorial between thine eyes, that the Lord's law may be in thy mouth. For with a strong hand hath the Lord brought thee out of Egypt. Thou shalt therefore keep this ordinance in his season from year to year." So every year they would do this sacrifice, okay? Now, this is very similar, if you think about it, to the Lord's Supper, okay? And the idea that we're remembering the Lord's death till he comes, right? And you know, I can imagine our kids are like, why do we do this, right? Why are we eating bread and drinking juice and making a big deal out of this? It just points you to, okay, we're remembering what he did for us, that he died for us. And this is kind of the same thing, only this is the picture of what Jesus was going to do, right? So this Passover event is picturing what Christ is going to do. We're actually remembering what Christ actually did. You know, what he, you know, it pictured, I mean, you know, obviously it's the fulfillment of that picture, okay? And so they did it year to year. Now, when it comes to keeping, you know, doing the Lord's Supper, you know, it says as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, right? So I don't believe it has to be year to year, but I can understand where someone's coming from if they were to say, you know what, no, we do it once every year at that time. And I can't fault them for thinking that way. Or if someone says, you know, as often as you do it, you know, we're going to do it every week. You know, I'm not against you. Okay, so I can see where everybody's coming from. We're gonna be you know, on the fence on this one. No, I'm just kidding. But we're in between that, where we're not doing it every week. We're doing it more like, you know, every quarter, so like 4 times a year. Okay, and usually that first quarter or around that time is when we're doing it around Easter. Okay, and so I think that's a good time frame because it gives you enough time to where it's not being. You do it every week, and it almost becomes a ritual where you're just kind of going through the motions, I believe. And once a year kind of seems, you know, I'd rather do it more than that, okay? And I don't think God faults us for wanting to do it more than that. But I can understand where if someone's like, well, that's how they did the Passover. But, you know, I think that we can do it as often as we want to. But I think we just always need to be careful that we're taking it seriously and we're doing it with gravity. Okay, and as long as you're doing it with gravity, you can do it every week if you're taking it seriously and remembering the Lord like you should. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Okay, go to Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22 and verse 1. Now look at a simple verse here, but I want you to see it. Luke 22 and verse 1. Luke 22 and verse 1. It says, "Now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover." Okay? So I want this to just be very clear. The feast of unleavened bread is the Passover. Okay? I don't believe these are 2 different feasts. I believe you're dealing with the same event. And it's going to be crucial to something I'm going to show you a little bit later here in the fact that it's the same feast. Okay? But go to Exodus chapter 12 because I want to show you some verses here that, you know, we kind of skimmed over dealing with this feast of unleavened bread. But I just want you to see that the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you know, that's the same thing. Okay. Now, if you look at Acts chapter 12, where Peter is in, he's in prison, remember, and it says it was the days of unleavened bread, and then it says, that he wanted to wait until after Easter to basically bring him out or whatever, or to kill him. Easter there is the Passover, okay? And Easter is just an old term. Passover is actually a newer term than Easter, okay? Easter was a term that was used before Tyndale actually penned that or came up with that word, Passover, which probably makes sense because if you're looking through that passage of when the Passover happened, it says, when I see the blood, I will pass over you. So I think it's a perfect word to describe that feast, okay, or describe that event, okay? So I don't think there's anything wrong with the word Easter, and I don't believe there's anything wrong with the word Passover, but he's waiting after Easter, which is the Passover. Then, we're dealing with the same event, okay? And that being said, in Exodus chapter 12 and verse 14, it says, "In this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever." Okay, now remember I talked about this with, obviously, Christ our Passover, and that would obviously, Jesus fulfills this, and obviously we'd be keeping that ordinance forever in that aspect, but also the fact that this is an ordinance of the first covenant, okay? The first covenant started when he took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. Okay, that's when that first covenant started, and therefore he's saying, do all these things for an ordinance forever. But when they broke that covenant and when he regarded them not, all that, it's disannulled, right? It's disannulled, it's been changed, and obviously it's changed to the New Testament and the time of Reformation, if you will. So reformed, taken away, whatever you want to say, okay? Replaced. So, but keep reading there. It says in verse 15, 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread. Even the first day ye shall put away leaven out of your houses, for whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. So this is very serious, meaning that they're not to eat any leavened bread, but they're not even allowed to have it. They're not supposed to see it. In chapter 13, it says not in their quarters, okay? But here it says not in their house, that they're basically not to have it anywhere around them, okay? Now, this is a good rule for dieting, okay? Is if you want to diet and not eat something, don't have it around to where you can see it. And I believe that's probably a big reason why, obviously, I think that it's representing something as far as like not having any leaven in your house, right? But at the same time, if you're not to eat leavened bread, but then it's just sitting around, you're going to end up eating it, okay? It's like Reese eggs, around this season, you buy those things and they're sitting there, they're taunting you, and you just want to eat them. And I think that this is a principle here that he's doing. Why he's saying don't even have it in your house, don't have it where you can see it, because you're not to eat it. And if you eat it, you're going to be cut off from Israel. Now, I don't necessarily believe that's talking about being put to death, but more so that you're like kicked out. Like you're not keeping that ordinance. You're not part of Israel anymore, because that's part of the covenant is to do this feast, okay? And go to verse 16. It says, in the first day there shall be an holy convocation, and in the seventh day there shall be an holy convocation to you. So notice that this is a 7-day feast. The first day is a holy convocation. The seventh day is a holy convocation, and it says to you, what does that mean? Well, first of all, it says, no manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat, that only may be done of you. Okay, so it's stating here that the first day of this feast, which would be the 15th day, and the 21st day, okay? And sometimes it'll say the first day or the seventh day, or it'll say the 15th day and the 21st day, because technically the first day is on the 15th of that month, okay? I'll get a little more detail on that in a second, but it's stating here that it's basically a Sabbath and a Sabbath, okay? And that's what we're going to be seeing here, is that a Sabbath is just a day of rest, and the Bible says that in the New Testament it says, let no man judge you, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of a holiday or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days, okay? So Sabbath days, plural, meaning that there's more than one Sabbath day. It's not just that seventh day of the week. Actually, these are all Sabbath. These holy convocations that they're doing is a Sabbath, because Sabbath just means rest. It's basically a time of rest. That's what the word even means, okay? Verse 17 there, it says, and ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. So here we see what it's called. It's called the feast of unleavened bread. Now, remember the feast of unleavened bread, which is the Passover, right? And it says, for in this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at even, ye shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even. Okay, so what I believe this is stating is that from even to even, meaning that from the same time, right? So it's exactly 7 days. But it's at the end of the 14th day, right? At the end of the 14th day at even, basically you would think about this time, right? Where the sun is basically even with the horizon. That's when you're killing the Passover and you're starting eating unleavened bread. Does that make sense? That it has to be at that point. You're not eating leaven. It's out of your house. And then it starts from there until you get 7 days later, which would be at the, I believe it would be at the end of the 21st day. Okay? So it's technically like starting, a lot of times in the Bible, I believe that the day starts at even, meaning that's when the next day starts. And so, whereas with us, midnight, for some reason, it starts at midnight. Okay? Why it starts at midnight, I'm not really sure, but that's when our next day starts. So you say, well, that doesn't make sense. It should start at dawn. I agree. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Right? But that's not how it works. It's most people, well, I guess around the world it starts at midnight, right? Because does anyone know if there's any other country or anybody that doesn't start at midnight and they're just like, nuts to the world and their clock? They're just like, I don't think so. I think everything it starts at midnight. But basically it's stating that the timeline here that you're dealing with. And you can go on to read the next few verses, but it's basically saying that you're not to have any leaven, okay? Whether you're born there, whether you're a stranger, no leaven is to be found. And when you're dealing with a holy convocation, you're dealing with basically a convocation. You can think of that first word, which means con, which means with, and vocation or convocation, meaning like it's like a summoning of an assembly, if you will. Like basically you're assembling together for something, and with this you would have this feast at the beginning of it and a feast at the end of it. Okay, and when I get into Numbers, you're going to see that there's sacrifices that are done, and there's a special thing that's done on these special Sabbaths, if you will. But let's first of all look at, you're in Exodus 12, look at verse 39. Why are they eating unleavened bread? Okay. Now, in the New Testament, when you're dealing with Christ, our Passover, obviously leaven would represent, sin, and, basically purge out that old leaven and have the leaven, of sincerity, or the unleavened bread of sincerity and all this that you're going to be dealing with there. But truthfully, here's why they're not to eat leaven. Okay, just the physical reason why they're not eating leaven is verse 39. It says, and they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any victual. So why was it unleavened? Because the whole point is to show that with haste they were thrust out, right? So if you think about the firstborn and why, they're showing this representation of the redemption of the firstborn, is to show you that the firstborn were saved, right? They were saved from death because all the firstborn of Egypt were killed. But then you think about, why are we eating unleavened bread? Why is that a big deal that we're eating unleavened bread? Because it's showing you how they were brought out and that it was a quick thing. It wasn't, and you say, well, why doesn't that need to be remembered? Okay, because people are constantly trying to change what history is. Okay, meaning this is that you can imagine that there could be some reason why they're saying, well, they didn't just go out the same day. It was like over a period of time, and they would try to maybe say something different about what happened. This is very clear. The whole reason they're even eating unleavened bread is because they didn't have time to even have leaven raise their bread. Okay, they couldn't let it sit out and a hot temperature and like have it sit out so that it can rise and be leavened. Okay, They didn't have time to do any of that. They were literally just thrust out that quick, okay? And that's something that keeps being brought up. It's like this day. So on the 15th day of the first month, Abib, they went out from Egypt in haste, okay? And that's what I believe that's representing. And even if you remember, when they were eating the Passover, remember it says, with your shoes girded on your feet and your staff in your hand. Why? Because you're going to be leaving. You're leaving, and I believe they were told that night to leave. And so with haste they were going out. I mean, they were just, it just pictures what really happened is what's going on there, okay? Go to Leviticus chapter 23. Leviticus chapter 23. Now, Leviticus chapter 23, this chapter hits all the feasts of the Lord, right? As far as, when you think of feasts, it's almost like holidays, if you will, that are done. But in these feasts, there's different things that they're remembering or showing. And this isn't a whole sermon on that, on the different types of feasts. But we see that the Passover is mentioned here. And so look at verse 4 there. I believe the Sabbath day was actually a feast as well. So when you look through this list, I believe there's 7 feasts of the Lord, and the Sabbath day is actually one of those feasts, okay? They would do that on a weekly basis, though, whereas these were done just once a year, okay? Now, in Leviticus 23 and verse 4, it says, "These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread. Unto the Lord 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. In the first day ye shall have an holy convocation, ye shall do no servile work therein. But ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord 7 days. In the 7th day is an holy convocation, ye shall do no servile work therein." So get what's going on here. You have the 7-day feast, if you will, or event that's going on here. The first day, Sabbath day. You're not going to do any work. But during those 7 days, there's an offering made by fire in each one of those days. Okay. On the 7th day, holy convocation again, no work, Sabbath day. Get the picture? And we see here that the 14th day at even is what starts this feast. Okay, so the Lord's Passover starts, in the Feast of Unleavened Bread are one and the self-same thing. It's just the fact that that 14th day when you kill the Passover, that's what starts it. Okay, that's what's starting that event. So it's at the end of the 14th day, and it's basically starting the 15th day, which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay. Now go to Numbers chapter 28, because Numbers 28 is actually going to show us, what was done on that first day, if you will, that first day of that holy convocation. And verse 16, so Numbers 28 and verse 16, it says, "In the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of the Lord." So we see this over and over again, okay? And it says, "In the 15th day of this month is the feast. 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten. In the first day shall be an holy convocation. You shall do no manner of servile work therein." I think you got it, right? You kill the Passover on the 14th day. The 15th day, though, that's when you have a Sabbath day. Okay? It's a holy convocation, no work's being done in it, okay? Verse 19, "But ye shall offer a sacrifice by fire for a burnt offering unto the Lord." Now, that's what this is. 2 young bullocks, and 1 ram, and 7 lambs of the first year, they shall be unto you without blemish. And their meat offering shall be of flour mingled with oil. 3/10 deals shall ye offer for a bullock, and 2/10 deals for a ram. A several 10th deal shalt thou offer for every lamb throughout the 7 lambs, and 1 goat for a sin offering to make an atonement for you. You shall offer these beside the burnt offering in the morning. So remember that each day you're supposed to do a burnt offering, right? It says this is beside that, meaning like this is on top of that. So each day you're doing this burnt offering every day of those 7 days, but it's basically giving you information like this doesn't substitute that burnt offering. That's to be done too. This is just, okay, you're going to do all these on this day. which is for a continual burnt offering. After this manner ye shall offer daily, throughout the 7 days, the meat of the sacrifice made by fire, of a sweet savor unto the Lord. It shall be offered beside the continual burnt offering, and his drink offering. And on the 7th day ye shall have an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein, or no servile work. Okay. So you see here that there's a lot of stuff going on that first day. Now, it doesn't say that all that stuff's done on the 7th day. It just basically says that you're resting on that 7th day. Okay. Now, the reason that I point this out is because of all the stuff that's going on during that day. Okay. And what this represents. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and I want you to see this verse. And obviously, you've seen it before, but I just want you to obviously see that Christ fulfills this Passover. Okay. And Christ is going to fulfill all these feasts. Now, some of these feasts that are in Leviticus 23 are fall feasts, if you will, that haven't happened yet, because the fall feast is like the harvest. It's the end of the world. And those will be fulfilled. But you say, well, why shouldn't we keep them? Well, the Bible says that let no man judge you concerning these things, because we have one sacrifice, and if you think about it, when you're dealing with these feasts, you're sacrificing animals to keep these feasts. That's why when people are like, "Oh, you got to keep the Sabbath day," I keep the Sabbath. Do you keep the Sabbath? Like, no, you don't. In that same chapter, before you look at this passage right here, and look at what you have to do for the Sabbath day. And when you're killing, sacrificing animals on the altar with the Levitical priesthood, then come talk to me, okay? But you're not doing that. No one's doing that. They haven't done that since 70 A.D., and so don't come to me about keeping the Sabbath day, because no one's doing it, okay? And second of all, if you want to have a day of rest, more power to you, but don't judge me in it. So if I don't want to rest, then get off my back. So 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6, I do want to rest, but if I'm not resting, get off my back. So I do like sleeping. I do like having a day where I'm not having to do anything. I'm waiting for that day. But 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 6, it says, your glorying is not good. Know ye not that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump? So let me ask you a question. Is leaven a good thing in this passage? Obviously not. We're talking about there's fornication, there's sin in the church, right? And so leaven is being likened unto sin that's in the church, and it's saying a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. This goes into the fact of false doctrine too. It talks about little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. So a lot of times leaven's not a good thing. It's not always a bad thing. Actually, there's a passage about how leaven is like, heaven is likened unto meal that has leaven in it, and I'm butchering that, but basically like 3 measures of meal with leaven or something like that. And kind of talking about how it grows and everything. So it's not always bad. There is a sacrifice that has leaven in it actually in Leviticus. So, but most of the time it's bad. And in this passage it's bad. And in verse 7 here it says, purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Now, this passage, at the end of the chapter, it even talks about with such a man know not to eat, which I believe in context is talking about the Lord's Supper, okay? Then you get into chapter 10, and it's talking about the Lord's Supper and not having a cup of devils and being at the table of the Lord and communion of the Lord. And then in chapter 11, obviously, it's hitting on the Lord's Supper, okay? So I think that that's in context dealing with the Lord's Supper in a lot of these cases, but it's saying keep the feast. So we are keeping the feast. When we keep the Lord's Supper, we're keeping that feast, okay? But it's not the same. And even in the Old Testament, it says there's going to come a day when you're not going to say that the Lord, it is the Lord that took me, that led me out of the land of Egypt, right? Talking about those that were in captivity, the 70-year captivity of Babylon, but it says, basically, and I'm going to misquote this, but it's basically saying, like, blessed is the Lord that brought us out of the land of the Chaldeans, and it basically stating that, now it's a little different, but how much more in the New Testament when the fact is that, we're not talking about the sacrifice of a lamb with the blood on the doorpost. We're talking about the sacrifice of the Lamb of God and the blood of the Lamb that's been sprinkled upon the mercy seat, and that is what we're remembering, and that's what we're honoring, okay? And so I just want you to see that, that we are keeping the Feast of the Passover, and I believe you can keep it spiritually speaking, and honoring Christ, but also just physically speaking when we keep the Lord's Supper at the house of God, which is the church of the living God, okay? Now, let me get into something here when it comes to this Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. And I want to show you a passage here. Go to Mark chapter 14. Mark chapter 14. And I hope this clears up maybe some confusion, because especially this passage right here, when Jesus goes to eat the Passover with his disciples, okay? Notice that what it says here, Mark 14 and verse 12. It says, "In the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, his disciples said unto him, Where wilt thou that we go and prepare that thou mayest eat the Passover?" So this is where it's important to understand that the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Passover are one and the self-same thing. And what you have to understand is that they're saying the first day of unleavened bread when you kill the Passover. When do you kill the Passover? On the 15th or on the 14th? How many times does it say on the 14th day, on the 14th day, on the 14th day that you kill the Passover? So what day are they on here? The 14th day. So technically, they're saying it's the first day of unleavened bread, but it's more so the fact that it's the first day of the feast, meaning the 14th, which starts the feast, okay? And when you understand that the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is called the Passover, meaning that the Passover and that 7-day feast are basically encompassed into one feast, okay? And it's basically, they're just using that interchangeably there. And I just want to show you that what's going on here is that when Jesus eats the Passover with his disciples, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember them eating a lamb or killing a lamb? No, you just remember them eating bread and juice, right? You're like, oh, it's wine. It says the fruit of the vine, actually. So put that in your, Calvinist pipe and smoke it. You're like, Calvinist? Yeah, because most of them are beer-drinking churches, But it's the fruit of the vine. He was drinking the fruit of the vine, and they were eating bread, okay? And they break the bread, they drank from the cup, and all that, okay? So what I believe is going on with this is that on the 14th day, they are eating at the very beginning of that 14th day, right? So there's that even and even, okay? And it says that even on the 14th day, you kill the Passover, right? But there's two evens on the 14th day. There's the beginning and then there's the end, right? And I believe what's going on here is that when the Lord ate the Last Supper, if you will, right? Or ate the Lord's Supper with them, or ate the Passover with them, that was at the beginning of the 14th day. That night is the night in which he was betrayed. Okay, and that when he died, it was at the end of the 14th day. Okay, and if you don't believe me, I just want to show you some verses here. Okay, in John 18, go to John 18 and verse 28 here. John 18 and verse 28. I want it to be very clear they had not killed the Passover yet. They had not eaten the Passover yet. And I'm talking about Israel as a whole. Okay, like the nation of Israel had not done that yet. Okay, so when it's saying that, it was the first, because it even, in another place it says the first day of unleavened bread drew nigh, and they went to go find a place to eat the Passover, right? So what you have to understand is sometimes in the Bible it'll state things a little differently as far as like when that day actually starts, right? And whereas some person could say, well, the 14th day is that first day, right? And another person would say, well, no, it's the 15th day, right? And you could have an idea there as far as what starts at. Well, we would all say the 14th day starts it, but, the 15th day is when you have that holy convocation, it's the Sabbath day, all that, right? So anyway, in John chapter 18 verse 28, it says, Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. So he had been betrayed. Remember, he was brought, obviously they were in the Garden of Gethsemane. So it's very early. It says, And they themselves went not into the judgment hall. Notice this, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. So, have they eaten the Passover yet? Not yet. Okay. Go to John 19 and verse 14. John 19 and verse 14. It says, and it was the preparation of the Passover. So was it the Passover yet, technically, as far as like when they've killed the Passover? It's the preparation of the Passover. And it says, and about the 6th hour, and he saith unto the Jews, behold your king. Okay? So we're obviously, he's going to the cross, all this. And verse 31 of chapter 19. Verse 31. It says, the Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation for what? The Passover, right? Because some people are like, well, it's the preparation of the Sabbath day, meaning like the Friday, the Good Friday hoax, okay? Jesus did not die on a Friday. But it says that it was the preparation of what? Of the Passover in context of chapter 19. Notice what it says here. It says that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day. So what it's stating is that we need to take the bodies down because the Sabbath day is coming. This is the preparation, but particularly it's the preparation of the Passover, right? And it says, for that Sabbath day was an high day. So do you see that this is not a regular Sabbath day? It says, for that Sabbath day is a high day, meaning that basically like it's a special Sabbath, if you will. Okay? It says, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So get the picture here. They're basically accusing Jesus, trying to get him crucified, but they won't go into this judgment hall. And if you think about it with like, Gentiles, they don't want to be defiled with the Gentiles, right? They're like, so we can eat the Passover. And it was the preparation of the Passover. And they needed to take him down because that particular, the Sabbath day, which was a particular Sabbath day. And when you see what the Feast of Unleavened Bread is, what's the 15th day of the month? What's the day after they kill the Passover? It's a Sabbath day, right? They're not doing any work on that day. So when you're dealing with the timeline, here's what's going on. I personally believe that Jesus was betrayed on a Wednesday night, right? He's in the Garden of Gethsemane. Obviously, they didn't use the term Wednesday, okay? It was the third day of the week, okay? But for sake of our calendar here, on Wednesday night, he ate the Lord, at even. He's getting, in this upper chamber. He's eating the Passover with his disciples. And then he goes through the Garden of Gethsemane. He's betrayed. He's brought before Caiaphas and all that. Now we're getting into morning. This is where the cock crows, with Peter. And when they're taking him to Pilate, they're like, we don't want to be defiled because we need to eat the Passover, right? That means they haven't killed the Passover yet. And then they're talking about that particular next day, that Sabbath day. And that's why, if you think about it, like, we need to break their legs because remember when Jesus gave the ghost, it was at least the 9th hour after. And if you think about, there's 12 hours in a day, they're drawing nigh to the end of the day, right? Which I believe is talking about at even, right? When you're talking about 12 hours in a day, you're dealing from sunrise to sunset, okay? And that basically you're running to that end at even when they're going to kill the Passover. So Jesus was literally killed on the evening of the 14th day. The next day was the 15th, which was a Sabbath day. If that was on a Thursday, he was killed on Thursday, that means Friday was a Sabbath day. Saturday, Sabbath day. And then on the first day of the week, what happened? He rose from the dead. So he was technically in the grave from, Thursday evening, Friday night, Saturday night, Saturday night, and then early Sunday morning he rose from the dead. Okay. Now some people believe that he actually died on a Wednesday night. Okay. The only problem I would have with that is that it'd be more than 3 days if he rose again early the first day of the week because he didn't die early the first day, right? He didn't die in the morning, right? I'm not against people, but here's the thing. I know some people believe that next day was the 14th, that basically he was killed on the 14th, okay? Like the beginning of the 14th day, okay? So just, watch me now. No, I'm just kidding. One person gets that. That he died at the beginning of the 14th day, okay? So if he died at the beginning of the 14th day, which would be at even, the next day, let's say that's a Sabbath day, which I don't see that in the Bible, okay? I don't see how that's a Sabbath day. And then the 15th day would be, so basically that Thursday would be the 14th, and it's a Sabbath day, he's in the grave, right? Then Friday would be the 15th, well, that's a Sabbath day, according to the Bible, right? So then he's in the grave. But then, Saturday, that's just the regular Sabbath day. So 3 Sabbath days, okay? And it sounds good, but here's the problem. How do you answer Mark 14? Okay? And show me where that 14th day is called a Sabbath day. And it says you're not supposed to do any work on the 14th day, okay? So, again, I'm not against, and you can say, well, he can still die on Wednesday. It's just the fact that Friday wasn't a Sabbath day. It's like, okay. Right? But I'm not against you if you think that. But to me, it's like when he's dead, everybody's supposed to be resting until he rises from the dead, which shows you salvation is not by works. It's all what Jesus is doing. But also, on that 15th day, they're doing all these sacrifices. Lambs without blemish, all this. On the Saturday, there's all these sacrifices that they have to do on that Saturday. The day after that Sabbath day is the Feast of First Fruits, which is Jesus is the first fruits of them that slept. He's the first fruits of the resurrection. It works out perfectly. I believe that it wasn't a coincidence that it was planned out that way, but just showing you that and how that Feast of Unleavened Bread. So I really wanted to hone in on that, okay, as far as understanding that the 14th day, at the end of the 14 days, when they killed the Passover, and that's how I believe you understand like Mark 14 or just the other passages where it's saying like, they were eating the Passover on the first day of unleavened bread. You know what I mean? And that was because it was the 14th day, but it was at the beginning of the 14th day. And then he died at the end of the 14th day, and then it went into the 15th day, which was technically a Sabbath, right? Which makes sense. Okay, so anyway, hopefully all that makes sense. And if you disagree with me, I'm good with you, but I'm right. So, no, I'm just kidding. I do believe I'm right on this issue. I think that it makes sense. I think that's a valid way of interpreting that. Exodus chapter 13. So just a couple things I want to hit here, and then we'll be done. Is that in verse 17 here, it's going to get into the fact that Joseph, they're going to take his bones away from Egypt, okay? Meaning that he was buried there in Egypt. And obviously we're dealing with like 430 years, well, less than 430 years. He didn't die the moment they went into Egypt, but basically, like close to 400 years before. It says in verse 17, it says, "And it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt. But God led the people about through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt." So this kind of gives you the reason why they were like butted up against the Red Sea, and why they were even in that part of the country, and they're not going up towards the Mediterranean and kind of going through the land to get up to where Israel's going to be, or where Canaan's at, is the fact that there was the Philistines, and he didn't want them to turn around and run back to Egypt because they see war. Okay, this also shows you that repenting is not always a good thing. Okay, this is actually a bad repenting, right? If they repent because they see war, means that they're not doing what they should be doing. But that being said, is that kind of explains why they're going through the wilderness, or why God's putting them through the wilderness. Okay, and verse 19, it says, "And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had straitly sworn the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones away hence with you. And they took their journey from Succoth and encamped in Etham in the edge of the wilderness." So if you remember, they came from Ramesses, right? Remember the treasure cities of Ramesses and all that in Egypt? That's where they were at. But then it says they went to Succoth, and now that was in chapter 12, at the end of chapter 12. Now we're in chapter 13. They're going from Succoth, or however you want to say that, Succoth to Etham. Okay, so it's kind of giving you this journey of how they're going. But just to give you some verses on that, where Joseph actually gave that charge about, basically taking his bones out of there. In Genesis 50 and verse 25, it says, in Genesis 50 and verse 25, it says, "And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence." Okay, so in Genesis 50, before he dies, he's basically saying that, take my bones out of here. I know that God's going to deliver you and take you out of here. So he had faith, and that's what it says in Hebrews 11. Okay, so the one thing said about Joseph, about his faith, is this. So this is an important event, as far as this goes. And I'm sure there's a sermon in there somewhere, but I'm not going to preach on it right now. But Hebrews 11:22, it says, by faith Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. Okay, so he believed that God, and I believe he believed what Abraham was shown is that they were going to be evil and treated for 400 years, and then that God would deliver them out of that. Okay, and Joseph, I believe, knew that, believed that, and shows that faith that Joseph had as well. And this is just kind of showing that. The last thing here in Exodus chapter 13, verse 21, is dealing with this pillar of a cloud and a pillar of fire. Now, this is going to be following them throughout the wilderness. When they're in the wilderness for 40 years, okay, which it wasn't the original plan, but they're going to be there for 40 years. This pillar of a cloud and pillar of fire is going to be with them this whole time, okay? But here's where it's mentioned. First of all, is in verse 21, it says, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. Okay, and when they go through the wilderness, it's going to say this about the manna. It's going to basically state that the manna was there until they went into the promised land. That the pillar and all this stuff until they go into the promised land, all these things are going to be there. That their shoes are not going to be worn, like all this stuff, that God is basically preserving them through this wilderness. Now, go to Isaiah chapter 4. The last thing I'm going to show you here is dealing with this pillar of a cloud and this pillar of fire. And I remember I was like, I know there's a place that says this, and I'm like, where is this at? And you ever have those verses where you're like, I know it says this about this certain topic, right? And you're just like, where is this? And you're just like trying to find it. And because what I was trying to find is like, I know it says somewhere that the cloud, because it says that the fire is for light by night. I think it says that many times, right? But then it's like, why is it a cloud, right? And I'm like, I know it says somewhere that it's a shadow, right? It's a shadow for the heat. And I'm like, where is this at? And it took me forever to finally like find, I don't know why. Maybe I was just, tired or something. I need to stop writing my sermons at 10 o'clock at night. But in verse 5 here, it says, and the Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion and upon her assemblies a cloud and smoke by day, and the shining of a flame of fire by night, for upon all the glory shall be a defense. So you see the same wording. Now, this is a little different than the pillar and the clouds. So that's probably why it was harder for me to find, or to remember where this is at. But in verse 6 it says, and there shall be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat, and for a place of refuge, and for a covert from the storm and from rain. And so when it talks about them going through the wilderness, there's basically, they're going to be going through like sunny times, and like it's going to be hot, and I believe this cloud is basically protecting them. And this cloud would move, which we'll get to later, or maybe I'll preach a sermon on it or something like that. But basically, whether it's night or day, either this cloud is going to move from the tabernacle, from where they're at, okay, and it's going to basically move, and then they go wherever it goes, okay? So it's basically leading them, and it talks about it leading them through the wilderness or wherever they're going. It's going to lead them where to go. So at night, it could be moving at night, and it's going to be that pillar of fire that's going to move. Or if it's by day, it's going to be that cloud that moves, okay? And I believe it's stating here that it's talking about this tabernacle for a shadow, and that cloud and that fire was over the tabernacle, okay? And so it's basically stating that it's this place of refuge, if you will. It's a place of light during the night, and it's a place of shadow, and from the heat and all that during the day. So, yeah, it was just embarrassing. I'm like, where is that verse? I know it says it somewhere, and I was like in Numbers, I was in Deuteronomy, I was like all over the place trying to find that verse, and it was in like Isaiah, which obviously that I believe is kind of talking about that a little bit, but it's also talking about something else as well. But I do believe it fits. So, but that's Exodus chapter 13. And next week, Lord willing, we'll be getting into Exodus 14, which is the parting of the Red Sea. And so stay tuned for that. And we'll end with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. Thank you for your word. Thank you for the book of Exodus. And thank you for these stories and everything that we can learn from. And Lord, just thank you for being our Passover and being our Passover lamb and being the Lamb of God that took away our sins. And Lord, we just thank you for that. Help us to remember that at all times, and especially when we set a time to actually keep the Lord's Supper. And Lord, just help us to remember your death and honor you for what you've done for us. And Lord, we love you. Pray also in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.